Formula One fans, something incredible happened. A leak of secret information about Ferrari's 2026 engines. How is this possible? Ferrari is extremely secretive, never releases technical information, yet the news came out. Steel cylinder heads instead of aluminum. How did this information leak? The answer is fascinating and involves suppliers. Ferrari uses an Austrian supplier, the famous AVL, the main consultant for racing car engines. And it's precisely from suppliers that leaks often come, because they're not subject to the same secrecy as the parent company. It's easier for leaks to happen from suppliers rather than from Ferrari. And this isn't the first time. Already in the 80s, news about Ferrari engines came from Tuscan suppliers who manufactured crankcases in the Mugello area. Suppliers represent the Achilles heel for controlling technical information. But why did Ferrari choose steel? Steel has greater thermal resistance, greater mechanical strength, resists heat better, and expands less. Stay with me because what I'm about to tell you is fundamental. I'd like to talk to you about an aspect that concerns Formula One, especially in these days of technical regulation change. What's entering 2026 is a regulation that's been extensively renewed both for the chassis part without ground effect and for the propulsion part related to the renewed 2026 power units. One of the news items that sparked greatest interest and curiosity beyond the controversy over compression ratio exceeded by Red Bull and Mercedes music is probably linked to Ferrari's use of steel cylinder heads for its thermal part. You know, steel is certainly heavier than aluminum, and many asked why Ferrari is looking for a solution that's clearly penalizing in terms of maximum weight. Already, Formula One cars are burdened in 2026 by battery weight. So, why does Ferrari go for using a denser material compared to traditional material used on racing engine cylinder heads, namely aluminum? And I myself made a video explaining that steel alloy has greater thermal resistance, greater mechanical strength compared to aluminum, music resists heat better and expands less, and therefore has substantially more reliable behavior in situations of high temperatures and high pressures. All this could represent an advantage because, on one hand, as I explained in my video, it reduces radiating masses. The material withstands higher temperatures, so there's less need for cooling, hence smaller water radiators and advantages in aerodynamic terms. There's another aspect I didn't mention, but I'll mention in this circumstance, which is certainly linked to better reliability of an engine with steel alloy cylinder head, because if I have engine components that resist stresses from high temperatures and high pressures better, these components necessarily also become more reliable, so that limit of 4 power units usable per season is more easily achievable. So there's a reliability discussion, but there's another point that sparked my curiosity, and I believe also some other foreign YouTubers. I noticed the question I asked myself is linked to reliability, precisely of the news about using steel alloy for cylinder heads. In other words, we know Ferrari is extremely reserved in releasing technical information, and we wonder why the news came out that they're using steel alloy instead of aluminum or aluminum-based alloys for manufacturing cylinder heads of 2026 engines in the thermal part. This surprises quite a bit, enough to raise a legitimate doubt. Does this news really have foundation, or is it part of a studied strategy to confuse competition? This naturally is also possible. However, in Tuscany there existed and partly still exists today suppliers involved in manufacturing crankcases for Ferrari Formula One engines in the 80s, and precisely from there at the time came many indiscretions about engines for the following season. Suppliers in fact weren't bound to the same secrecy levels as the parent company, or rather, it was much easier for a news leak to start from them rather than directly from Ferrari. And we have Ferrari using an Austrian supplier, the famous one I talked about in my last video, AVL, which is the main consultant regarding racing car engines and Ferrari. And I wonder perhaps that'll be the origin of the news precisely about using innovative materials on new engines. Meaning, I'm talking about steel alloy instead of aluminum-based ones. Mainly aluminum-based ones of new 2026 engines, and the doubt that these suppliers sometimes represent the Achilles heel for controlling Ferrari's technical information. So, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not saying the news could have leaked from AVL, but my past experience leads me to say that to keep solutions secret, you must not only pay attention to your own, let's say, to news coming out of my company, but you must also pay attention to suppliers. Because many times, suppliers have, let's say, loser meshes. This is the crucial point. Ferrari can be as reserved as it wants, but suppliers have less control, have fewer secrets, have fewer restrictions, and therefore it's easier for technical information to come out from them that Ferrari would like to keep secret. This happened in the 80s with Tuscan suppliers from Mugello, and it could have happened now with AVL, the Austrian supplier collaborating with Ferrari for 2026 engines. This is the great vulnerability of any Formula One team. You can't do everything internally. You must have suppliers. You must have consultants. And these suppliers and consultants work with other companies, have other clients, have employees who talk, who share information. And sooner or later, something leaks. This is reality, and Ferrari knows it but can't do anything about it, because AVL is too important. Their experience is fundamental for developing 2026 engines, and so Ferrari must accept this risk. Let's recap what we know about steel cylinder heads. Ferrari chose them for greater thermal resistance, greater mechanical strength, resists heat better, expands less, allows smaller radiators with aerodynamic advantages, and greater reliability to reach the 4-power unit limit more easily. But how did the news leak? Ferrari is reserved, doesn't release technical information, yet the news music came out. The answer is probably in suppliers. AVL in particular, the Austrian supplier main consultant for engines. Suppliers aren't subject to the same secrecy as the parent company. Music, it's easier for leaks to happen from them, as happened in the 80s with Tuscan suppliers from Mugello. Suppliers represent the Achilles heel for controlling technical information. Ferrari must pay attention not only to news coming out of the company, but also to suppliers because suppliers have looser meshes. This is the story of steel cylinder heads and the secret information leak about Ferrari's 2026 engines. A fascinating story showing the vulnerability of even Formula One's most secretive team because you can't control everything, you can't do everything internally, and suppliers are the weak point, the Achilles heel. But Ferrari knows it and continues anyway working with AVL because their experience is too precious to give up, even if it means accepting the risk of information leaks. This is Formula One, where secrets rarely remain such for long.